Thank you for joining us. I'm going to start slowly introducing as everyone joins. My name is Yonit Behar, and I'm the Associate Curator at the Paul Art Museum in Chicago. I'm so pleased to present tonight's program with three wonderful people. Tonight's program is in conjunction with one of our current exhibitions, Solos Krista Franklin, featuring the work of Chicago-based artist Krista Franklin and her vast range of materials and references situated at the intersection of poetics, popular culture, and the dynamic histories of the African diaspora. Franklin creates books, poetry, collages, handmade paper, installations, murals, performances, sculptures and lectures, and much more. And all of these are presented in one form or another in both the exhibition and public programs. I take this opportunity to invite all of you to a couple of our upcoming programs. Next week, on Saturday, October 8th, we will host an in-person conversation on collaboration between Krista Franklin and Colleen Smith, supported by Expo Chicago and the Paul Center for Black Diaspora. And Sunday, October 16th, another in-person conversation and a joint book release celebration of Tricia Hersey, founder of the NAB Ministry, new book, Rest is Resistance, as well as Krista's new book, Solos, taking place at Haymarket House. More information about these and other upcoming programs can be found in the chats as well as our website. Tonight's program is Octavia E. Butler Tarot Deck, a conversation with Adrienne Marie Brown and Krista Franklin, moderated by Professor Julie E. Moody-Freeman. Both Adrienne and Krista, together with other collaborators, have put together the incredible Octavia E. Butler Tarot Deck, forthcoming with AK Press. They will tell you more about it. But Krista, I would say that Krista made the images for the major arcana for the tarot deck, and we have them currently on view at DPEM. We'll see some images of them shortly. I want to thank our speakers and moderator, as well as our supporters for this program, DePaul's Women's Center, Center for Black Diaspora, Department of Women's and Gender Studies, and Department of History of Art and Architecture. I will introduce our moderator, who will then introduce our speakers for tonight. We will then turn it back to our moderator, who will initiate the Q&A. Please feel free to write us your questions in the chat, and we will select a few questions to then pose to the speakers. Julie E. Moody-Freeman is the director of the Center for Black Diaspora, co-director of the Social Transformation Research Collaborative, and an associate professor in the Department of African and Black Diaspora Studies at DePaul University. She is the co-editor of the Black Imagination, Science Fiction, and the Speculative, and the Black Imagination, Science Fiction, Futurism, and the Speculative. Her work on African American romance has appeared in Romance Fiction and African American Culture, the Ruthless Research Companion to Popular Romance Fiction, and the Journal for Popular Romance Studies. She's also the creator and host of the Black Romance podcast, which is building on oral history on Black romance writers. Thank you so much, Julie, and now I will turn it to you.
Thank you so much, Ionit, and thanks for inviting me. In a 1979 interview with Veronica Mixon for Essence magazine, Octavia Butler stated the following: "As a writer of science fiction, I was free to imagine new ways of thinking about people in power, free to maneuver my characters into situations that don't exist. For example, where is there a society in which men and women are honestly considered equal? What would it be like to live in such a society? Where do people not despise each other because of race or religion, class or ethnic origin?" Butler's words about science fiction's ability to allow for imagining the possibilities of being and becoming reminds me very much of Rachel True's words about what tarot cards mean to her. In the introduction to her book, True Heart Intuitive, True highlights the usefulness of tarot cards, quoting her. Tarot is exceptional at laying out possible future outcomes based on present energies. However, nothing is set in stone. Your future is always shifting based on your choices. We are always becoming. I am invoking both Octavia Butler, who wrote sci-fi fiction, and Rachel True, who developed a tarot deck and guidebook, because by creating the Octavia E. Butler Tarot Deck, our esteemed guests this evening, Adrienne Maree Brown and Krista Franklin, intuited the convergence of science fiction and tarot. They, for me, have merged two genres that allow us to imagine new ways of being and imagine the possibilities in times when nothing seems possible. For tarot, one uses intuition to read the card's visual symbols that lay out the possibilities to imagine new emergent ways and strategies of being. For Butler, science fiction allowed her to write stories that do the same thing, and that also allowed her to think about survival, as she told Veronica Mixon in the 1979 interview when she stated, "I've been told again and again by readers that my characters aren't nice. I don't doubt it. People who must violate their long-held beliefs are rarely pleasant. I don't write about heroes. I write about people who survive and sometimes prevail." I'd like to welcome our two guests for this evening, Adrienne Maree Brown and Krista Franklin. Adrienne Maree Brown is a writer, activist, and facilitator, and author of Grievers, the first novella in a trilogy on the Black Dawn imprint. Adrienne has written a number of books, including Holding Change, The Way of Emergent Strategy, Facilitation, and Meditation, We Will Not Cancel Us and Other Dreams of Transformative Justice, Pleasure Activism, The Politics of Feeling Good, Emergent Strategy, Shaping Change, Changing Worlds. Adrienne also co-edited Octavia's Brood, Science Fiction from Social Justice Movements and How to Get Stupid White Men Out of Office. She's the co-host of several podcasts, including How to Survive the End of the World, Octavia's Parables, and Emergent Strategy podcast. Adrienne is rooted in Detroit. I'd also like to welcome Krista Franklin. Krista Franklin is a writer, performer, and visual artist, the author of the artist's book, Under the Knife, and the chapbook, Study of Love and Black Body. She's also published in Poetry, Black Camera, The Offing, Vinyl, and a number of anthologies and artist books. She's the recipient of the Helen and Tim Meyer Foundation for the Arts Achievement Award and the Joan Mitchell Foundation Painters and Sculptors Grant. And her visual art has been exhibited at DePaul Art Museum, Poetry Foundation, Constell C, Rootwork Gallery, Museum of Contemporary Photography, Studio Museum in Harlem, Chicago Cultural Center, National Museum of Mexican Art, and the set of 20th Century Fox's Empire. Thank you both for being here, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. I'll turn it over to you. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Julie.
Thank you, Julie. That was beautiful. I love the weaving you just did.
Yeah, man.
Like, yes, I don't even know what we need to, that was it.
That was it. I mean, are we done? Is it over?
It's like, that's it. Well, I think like the very first thing we get to do is like look at your art, right?
Yes, we're gonna look at some of these
There and show
pieces.
people, yeah.
Some of these pieces, you know, and some of them are featured in solos at the DePaul Art Museum, which is, you know, what this beautiful event, you know, that we're here participating in is connected to. I just want to first say thank you so much, Adrienne, for joining me on this event. It's an
I was so
honor.
excited when you asked me, because
It's an honor, my friend.
such a
Listen, you
big
know, we've been
fan.
on this journey for a minute, so it's nice
really
to be able
have.
to talk about it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So the works that I'll just give it like a really brief kind of, you know, survey, and then we'll jump in. So the works that you're looking at, the audience, thank you all for being here, by the way. Thank you for joining us into this Zoom room this evening and spending your time with us. These works are just a little glimpse of the major arcana of the Octavia E. Butler Tarot Deck that I was invited to participate in and play with, thanks to my good friend, Adrienne Marie Brown. And, you know, Adrienne, I hope that you will kind of give us a little bit of the background, right? Kind of walk us through the background about how I kind of came into this, because it was already in movement, you know, when I jumped on board. So I hope that you'll talk a little bit about that too. But so you're looking at original works that I created for the deck specifically, that are all a part of the major arcana of the Octavia E. Butler Tarot Deck. You know, for those of you all who are not familiar with tarot, you know, those are would be like the trump cards of the deck. You know, so we'll talk a little bit about that, but you know, the major arcana really signifies to me, you know, you could talk a little bit more about this too, Adrienne, you know, major life events, major, you know, gigantic kind of changes or shifts that may occur, right? Things that are like lifetime, you know, shifts, right? That the deck will reveal to you. And so this particular works are just a sample of those, you know, those individuals, those cards.
They're so beautiful, Krista.
Thank you, my friend. And, you know, some of them were originally made, and then a few of them are actually taken from, you know, the details of pieces that I had previously created without knowing that I would be involved with this project, you know, that seemed to just fit very elegantly within the sphere, you know, within this new universe that we were developing, creating together. So, you know, it's been truly a joy to just be able to, you know, be in this kind of artistic conversation, not just with Octavia's work, because, you know, that was already happening, you know, much as it was with you, Adrienne, right? We've both been in conversation with Ms. Butler for years, you know?
And she's like, quiet girl.
Yeah, a really, really long time, you know? So this to me is like the culmination, the final culmination for me of that conversation I've been trying to have with her.
That's right. I love that. Yeah, I think, you know, I can tell a little of the story of how we ended up at this deck, as y'all look at these cards, which are gorgeous. A question I have for you though, in the exhibition, how are they huge? Are they like big?
They're not that big. They're like 9 by 12, maybe something like
that's
that.
Still bigger than the card, though.
Yeah, they're bigger than the cards for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, but they're not like gigantic. A couple of them are larger.
Can people like purchase those?
You know what? I'm trying to figure that out yet.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure that out.
I'm like, I'm an art collector now.
Listen, come on now, art collector.
I was like, I could at least afford a print. I'm just like,
I'm still working through it in my mind.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine being a visual artist. That's actually the hardest part always to me, because I'm like, I can't imagine creating something just being like, okay, now you're just gonna buy it and put it in your house, and I won't have, like, I'm like, if I make a book, I'm like, I still have the book and you also have the book. But I'm like, yeah, the idea of like pouring something and then being like, okay, I'm like, I don't know if I would ever do that. I'll be like, you can all have prints. Okay. So yeah, the deck itself. So as Krista said, like, we've been dancing around each other. I remember seeing early collages of yours. I remember immersing myself in Octavia's work and just being like, there's something like, she's not done teaching us what she's here to teach us. And actually, it feels like we have some responsibility of keeping her name in people's mouths and keeping these ideas at the front and center of our collective consciousness. And my friends, Chelsea Cleveland and Alta Star, we're part of this community called Black Organizing for Leadership and Dignity. And they started having an evening there that would be a night where we offered healing. And so the three of us would often be in this room doing like back to back, all doing tarot readings for everybody in the whole community, right?
Wow.
So we knew each other as tarot oracles and tarot practitioners. And Alta is like cream of the crop, top tarot oracle master, like has, the last time I checked, like 80 something decks, and just is a deep comparative scholar of all the different ways that the tarot has been developed and been used. And So we already had a relationship around it. And then Chelsea, who's an organizer in Connecticut, Chelsea had a dream. And the dream was that there was this tarot deck, this Octavia E. Butler tarot deck, that was something we could carry around with us. And that when the change happened and we had to very quickly go, we were able to grab the deck. And it was like one of the most precious items that many of us had that we were taking with us. Chelsea has this dream, wakes up, texts me, and is like, I just dreamed this. Now, I've been wanting to do an Octavia Butler tarot deck forever, and I'd been ideating, thinking. I was like, absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
This needs to happen. Absolutely, yes. And I was like, can I reach out and tell Alta too? And it was like, bet, it's on. And Alta was immediately like, oh, yes, I'm here for it. Absolutely, let's do this. So the three of us started a conversation around like, what would this need to be in order to really honor Octavia's legacy?
Mm-hmm.
And it was very clear, at that point, we reached out to the estate and it was just like, hey, we're thinking about doing this. And where the estate was at that point, they were like, sure, go ahead, as long as it's like Black artists, whatever. And I was like, that's what we're already thinking. Yeah. So we were like, cool, let's do this. And we were like, we want it to be Black artists who've already been honoring Octavia's legacy. And there's basically this field, there's so many, like
a lot.
Honestly, we were like, we could either do something where all these different artists just do one card, or we could do something where we have like what we ended up coming up with. Because it was like, how many can we actually handle? How many can we take on and manage getting the art in and all that kind of stuff? Yes. So Krista was the first person that we were like, Krista has to be a part of this. Like the collage work that you've been doing was like this, what y'all are seeing. It's like this really profound juxtaposition of like past, present, future in a way that feels like that's what Octavia was always asking us to do, is figure out like, how do we learn from our past, compost our past, remix our past, and apply ourselves into the future, articulate ourselves into the future. Absolutely. So it's like, Krista gets that. Krista's the first person we invited on board. And we were like, would you be the art director? Like, would you just come and like put your whole artistic stank on this? And you were an enthusiastic yes. So we started to have a team, and then we were like, okay, who are some of the artists that we feel like would be down to do this, would be available, and also how would we treat them fairly? Like, how do we do this? Yeah. And we also reached out to AK Press, because I was like, they've never done a tarot deck. I've never done a tarot deck, but I trust AK, like the way that they approach printing, the way that they approach publishing. There's a lot of integrity, like they're willing to learn, but there's a lot of integrity. So I had a sense of like, whatever we come up with, that's what they will make sure gets published into the world. And I trust that. Yeah. So slowly we're pulling folks together. And then it was like, okay, the artists, like in our dream world, who do we want to be the artist on this? And I just want to say, everyone we asked said yes, like so fast and with so many questions. So Crystal Clarity is someone who has been doing all this movement artwork and like shows up and does all this massive mural artwork, and had actually been working on a deck of her own. So she came on board. She's one of the artists. And pretty early on, we realized Krista should do the major arcana, so that the collage work, the major arcana, another way to understand it is like, it's a 21 card journey, right? You are coming in and you start off as the Fool. Right. Everyone starts off as the Fool. Nothing. Everybody. You're taking a massive adventure. You've got to rely on, what the universe brings to you. And then you move on this journey all the way until you reach the world, where you're like, I'm interconnected. I understand my role. Everything makes sense. And then you cycle right back through it. Right. The idea is that we keep moving through this cycle over and over again in our lives. So it felt like that should all be one artist, one journey. And then we were like, okay, but then how do we split up the rest of these cards? And Krista and Crystal were like, how about we do a divination? We invite these artists, and then let's do a divination to figure out who's going to take what pieces. So I wanted to tell you, so Soraya John Lewis, who I actually have, like, let's see if I can show you this without making a huge mess. This is one of Soraya's pieces that is all day, every day.
I'm such a fan of her.
I'm such a fan of her too. And she also does collage, mixed medium work, really beautiful.
Gorgeous.
And started something called Wild Seed in New Orleans that was an Octavia-based organizing collective and women's arts collective. So I was like, I know Soraya has to be a part of this. And then it was John Jennings. John had done the cover of Octavia's Brood, has done the graphic novels for Kindred and for Parable of Sower. So it was like, you know, that made total sense. And John Jennings was again like, you know, like, are you kidding me? John also like, he's like, I work, I don't sleep. I just make art.
That's all he does.
I was like, okay.
He does not sleep.
It's gonna be fine. He doesn't sleep, but that's fine because he gets it all done and it all works out. And then we had Paul Lewin, and Paul Lewin, it does, I mean, stunning, otherworldly, and Afrofuturist work that actually has been, there's a set of covers of Octavia's work that are Paul Lewin covers for Octavia's work. But whenever I see his work, I'm like, oh, that's a future I want to be a part of. Like there's you know, in the same way, I feel like the collages, there's always a chaos. And then I feel like Paul Lewin is like, and here's the order. And like having those juxtaposed in the same deck to me was like very thrilling.
Incredible illustrator.
Tarot covers all that ground, right? It's like, yes, you're on this journey. And also there's a stillness or a landing in. And then Damon Davis. So Damon Davis is a multi-dimensional artist, like literally creates in every way. Right now is creating an Afrofuturist opera libretto, like that I got to hear, and I was like, oh, bang, that's really actually good. And has done these gorgeous busts, this series called Crack, where it's like his bust and there's like gemstones implanted in it. But also works as a visual artist and is again this otherworldly Afrofuturist creator who's also made these offers inside of movement. So our artist team came together and I was like, oh my God, like just alone, if there was no words to this deck, and if it was only the art, which Alto was a big teacher, was like, Adrienne, you know, I'm like, I like words. I like writing. You know, I want to put Octavia quotes and like, right. And Alto was like, okay, but Tarot is a visual art, right? These cards have, you know, there's themes that we can bring that are throughout history. We decided to be like, let's give our folks freedom, you know, to move away from all the traditional elements and see what they create. So some have it, some don't. And again, I also like that, but I do think that every single piece, like you look at it, you pick it up and you're like, I understand what I'm feeling. You know, I understand what this card could represent to me. So then Chelsea and Alta and I are like the oracles of the deck. So we're the ones who went through, we found Octavia Butler quotes that needed to go with each card throughout the entire deck. And then we also wrote original content about how to read that card, what it means if it's upright, what it means if it's reversed, and then what's a question to take away into your day or into your week or, you know, whatever period you're reading for. What's a question that you can walk around with and hold in your head? Because we feel like Octavia gave us more questions and answers in a lot of ways. So we had a blast doing that. And then as we were moving through the process, we realized it's Octavia. We need herbal guidance. We need like an herbal oracle. So we brought in Lottie Spady.
Plant medicine.
Exactly. Lottie Spady, who is a incredible herbalist based out just outside of Detroit now, but was in Detroit most of the time that I knew her. And she came through with every single card and said, what is the herbal medicine that goes with this for each day, right? And this is our encouragement that we think, you know, Octavia was trying to tell us, go outside, get to know the medicine around you, get to know the herbs around you, get familiar with it. You might have to rely on it to live your life, right? So then we were like, well, someone's got to draw the herbs. So then Vanessa Reynolds, who's done the majority of tattoos on my body and is an incredible artist, was like down to do the herbs. But then Nolika Radaway, who is this incredible podcaster who runs the Raising Rebels podcast, their child, Moxie, had a dream that they were involved in this deck. And the child at the time was 12 years old. So Nolika reached out and was like, Moxie had a dream that they heard about the deck, you know, they imagined and dreamt that they were in it. So I just want to say that. And I was like, I'd never seen Moxie's art. I don't know. But the timing is right age-wise, because Lauren Olamina was that age at that time in the history of the parables. So I was like, I guess that's
Yeah.
what's got to be. So that's what the deck has, is this herbal art from this baby and this tattoo artist, and then these oracles, and then the herbal piece, and like all of it, right? And then we've just been working as a team, like going through a lot, learning a lot, really like, even, down to stuff like, how do you understand the Five of Cups? Here's how I understand the Five of Cups, and like really getting at that level. But then also, how do you build a tarot deck? What comes first? Like for you as the art director, I'd love to hear some of what you've learned in the process of making your first tarot deck.
Ooh, so much, so much, so much. And how many years have we been doing this? How many years?
Actually, let me see if I think it's been 6, but
I
think it's been like 6 years, but I think 3 of like hardcore, like we've got the artists, we're designing and laying stuff out.
Right.
And I think it's been like about 6 years total.
Right. Well, I was saying earlier to Yoni and to Julie and to Matthew that, when you came to me about it, I was of course enthusiastic, but I was also terrified.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know anything about tarot. I knew I have been getting readings for years. You knew a
little something.
I knew a little something because I'm a believer in the divination. I'm a believer in like seeking insight from the other place, and those who can mediate those kind of conversations, right? I'm always into that. So, of course, I had been exposed to decks before, but I had never owned one. I never studied it as a form of understanding, right? So I was like, I cannot very well engage myself in this process without familiarizing myself with what the histories are, what decks are the most prolific decks, right? It was really a crash course, and so I taught myself primarily through owning a deck, and then also through watching a lot of YouTube readers.
That's great.
And I still listen to this day.
Because once you get into it, you're like, oh, I need to know everything y'all are telling me about.
Absolutely. Really studying it, right? And studying it as, for me, it really spoke to like an artist book. For me, it was like tarot is like an unbound artist book to me. It's like a series of images that are telling a story. You can intuit however you want what those meanings of those cards may be, what the artwork may be, right? I mean, of course, it comes with their own like understandings, right? But you can also introduce your own understandings of the world through the imagery. So that was really compelling to me. That was really exciting to me, because then I was able to reach into my own imaginative landscape, particularly as it pertains to Miss Butler. I kept having kind of go back to her as a touchstone. It was like I'm actually having another kind of conversation with her work and with her writing, right? And thankfully, because of the writing that you provided, along with Chelsea and Lottie, and also the work that Alta was doing, it just really helped me to ground myself back into that world. You know what I mean? Back into that world. So then some of this image, like this one here, comes from a book that I did a long time ago, See the Book of Eve, right? It's a detail of one of the images that came from that project. So, again, I was kind of circling myself too a little bit in the process of, I learned a lot, but it was a rigorous training. I took it very seriously. I took my role as like a coordinator of sorts very seriously of these other incredible artists, because I have such deep respect, I think, for everybody who was involved. I have been a fan, you know what I mean? So it's hard. It's hard to like be,
I know.
quote unquote director, right? Of people that you're actually fanning.
Can you make it like this famous artist that I love?
You don't want to say anything. You want to just say like, just do you, right? Make what you make, But it was
actually, I have to say that's something that you brought as an artistic director that was so helpful for the team, because you were like, you trust these artists and give them options, right? Like let them know, like, because I was like, some of these artists, I'm like, there's work that they already do that is the message of this card. There's some of them that we need them to create new stuff. It's a mix. And you were just like, trust these artists, let them know, like, we need these cards from you. It can be stuff you've already created. It could be new creations. It's up to you. And I think that allowed for much more richness to come into the work, right?
Absolutely.
Like actually each of these people come with a history, just like Octavia comes with a history. In some ways, this whole deck is a massive collage,
It
you know,
is.
of
It
all these
is.
different wisdoms. And one thing I do want to name that Octavia's people said is like, Octavia might have laughed at this, you know,
Yeah.
scoffed at this, right?
Yep.
Like, you know, the whole idea of it. And I also hold that, like, I've been trying to be like, this project is so cool. And also let's not take it too seriously. Like, let's have fun with it. And let's make sure that that fun is, you know, stays in the process, no matter what else happens. And
Absolutely.
that we still feel like this is magical. This is so cool. And I want to shout out Yashna, because Yashna Padamsi has come on as like
talk about Yashna.
manager, and Yashna like brought the fun and the groundedness in, you know, like I would just be like, what's happening? What's the next deadline? Let's make it happen. What's going on? And Yashna was like, let's take a breath. What gave us all joy today? Like, we, you know, just like brought the like our bodies, ourselves, our wholeness is all in the energy of this deck.
Yes,
so
and the pleasure, right? And the pleasure of
when
it.
you feel the pleasure, a lot of that's from Yashna.
Absolutely.
You know, and I do want to show y'all. So these are early, I have some early prototypes of this. A lot has changed, but there's like, you can kind of get a sense of like, it's this box. The book can go in the box. And then there's going to be the cards. These are not cut up, but these are some of the cards. We've shown these up online. You can see Paul Lewin's work. You can see John Jennings' work. And, you know, the back of the cards is actually designed. This box shape is something that was in Octavia's journals. And so, oh, Ben Blount.
Our designer, Ben Blount. We cannot forget our designer. I know.
So Ben is,
you brought it all together.
Outrageously, incredibly skilled and talented designer who we were like, we want something that has a box and a bag and all these cards and a book, and the book has to be really big because of course we were like, we need to write essays that contextualize the tarot and contextualize Octavia and like what our journey was through all of this. So the book is it really feels like a book that could almost stand on its own. And something that we thought about a lot was people in the apocalypse, things get lost, right? So we're like, if someone loses the book, we want to make sure that the art of the cards is strong enough to carry. If they lose the cards, the book can still get them where they need to go, right?
Yes.
And then there's a bag. So the bag is designed to be able to hold the book and the cards. So, you know, the box can be what you leave at home, but then this is what you are like, okay, I got my deck, throw it in my to-go bag, like Octavia taught us to always have ready, and be able to go. And I kind of imagine that people might end up buying 2 decks and just having one that lives in their to-go bag and one that they're using regularly. That's what I've done with some of my favorite decks, but we'll see what happens. But, you know, Ben Blount, we sat down with Ben and we were like, we want all of this. And we want it to be like gold leaf and gold edges, like just decadent tarot deck, right? And we want it to be affordable. So it was really a fun dynamic artistic tension, and Ben just was like, okay, how about this, how about that, and was so thoughtful, like in a way that I hope someday we can play Octavia's family the video of just Ben presenting their
oh my God, I mean, because like, the number of designs that the number of designs that Mr. Blount put in the world for us, we were like, it was so hard to choose, wasn't it?
Exactly.
All of them were so extraordinary.
It's like, do you want A, B, C, D?
We were like, all of them.
I was like, but to me, I was like, is there a world in which we produce all of these?
We want all of it.
Not in the publishing world, but I do think we have found our way to one that I think you will feel and hold and be able to work with it. A lot of thought has gone into it, and
so much thought.
I think like, just so much thought, so much intention, and then, you know, I want to say, because people are like, well, where is it? Can I order it? Like, what's going on with that?
Talk about it.
So, you know, from when we started working on it and reached out and got permission from the estate to do something, the estate completely has shifted, right? They've got a whole new process in place of how things move. And so we want to honor, like, it's very, very important to us that we honor the estate and that we do this in alignment with what their process is. So that's been one thing. And then COVID-19 slowed down everything in the world, especially printing. So every book, you know, like you know, I like to write my books and get them out very quickly. And so it's like, instead of something being like, oh, you turned it in and 3 months later, you could expect something to be printed in the world. Now it's like sometimes 6 months, sometimes 9 months.
Yeah.
So even sending our stuff back and forth to be like, okay, we've got a prototype, that process has taken longer. Like, so the slowdown there, plus like wanting to make sure we're doing right with the estate that's the only thing that we're waiting on now.
Yeah.
Everything else is in place. All the designs are finalized. The layout is finalized. It's ready to go.
Yeah.
So we're, I think in the next month or so, landing the plane there, and then we'll be able to post a pre-order link, and we want y'all to pre-order. We want you to order when it comes out.
Pre-order it. Pre-order that baby. Get that baby.
Yeah. And I do think it's worth the wait. You know, Octavia's Brood also took 5 years to create. And there's something about that, like that Octavia, like the work of Octavia, you have to do your inner work and your collaborative work and your outer work to do the work well, I believe. So it feels like it's been that kind of process, and it's been very sustainable. Like everyone in the project has gone through real life shit over the process of it as well. And I feel like we've all been with each other. We've been through death. We've been through breakup. We've been through life changes, been through health changes, like
moves,
just been with
relocations,
everything. We've been through everything with each other.
Yeah.
And the team, like, was such a pleasurable team to work with in the creation of it.
Truly.
So that's a lot about the deck and all of that. Krista, I want to go back before all that.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you, what initially pulled you to Octavia's work years ago? Like what was it about Octavia that you wanted to tie your life to?
Oh my God. You know, I don't think I realized that I wanted to tie my life to her work until when she died. After she died, it was pivotal for me. That was a pivotal moment for me. You know, like I had the pleasure of seeing her speak once in person before she passed away. And it's even funny for me to even say, not funny, but it's weird for me to even say pass away, because I still don't think, like, in my mind, you know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
But the way that she left, it was so mysterious and so quick that I'm like, she just in another dimension.
She's over with Tupac on that other place.
She ain't even dead. She's somewhere else. You know what I mean? She bounced. She walked through the portal.
They came and got her. The aliens were like,
yeah, she walked through the portal. Well, aliens came and got her. Something happened. You know, something otherworldly happened. So, and it did. You know, it did. Something otherworldly did happen. But so 2006 was the year that I started making Seed. And I started making Seed. You know, the interesting thing about Seed, the Book of Eve, is that I started it because I wanted cinematic representation of her work. I wanted pictures. I wanted visuals of her work, you know? And so I was like, well, since I'm never going to get cinema, I'm never going to get my movie adaptations, I'm just going to make these collages.
That's right.
Right. So that's what I did. I ended up kind of, you know, using each one of her books as a site to like explore visual landscape. Right. And I thought about them as page panels. I thought of them as 2 separate pages that you bring together like a book that opens. Right. And that each page panel was referencing one of her novels. I did every novel except for Survivor.
Yeah. Which is
for, you know, many reasons. Right. So that was the beginning when I was like, boop, me and her got a long conversation to have, because I can't have this conversation with her anymore in flesh. I have to do it in this other realm, you know? And, you know, but I found I've been on her though since the early 90s. You know, the first book that I read of hers was Wild Seed. It was recommended to me from a friend, was like talking about it. She just told me, she almost told me the whole story. She was like, it's this book. She basically told me the whole story. She was like, I don't care about spoilers though. You know what I mean? Like, I'm gonna read it anyway. I'm watching it anyway.
It's gonna be fine.
I don't care. So, you know, she was like, this is what happens. And, you know, the dolphin and the da. And I said, what? So I was in Chicago too. I was visiting Chicago. I didn't even live here yet. I was visiting Chicago.
Wow.
And I went to a bookstore, which I later found out when I moved here was a legendary bookstore called Lit X, where all of these artists and writers were just like proliferating at that time. But I didn't know because I was busy. So I ended up going into this basement bookstore down the street from where, you know, my friend was staying at the time.
Yeah.
And they had a copy of Wild Seed. And I picked it up and I bought it and I read that bad boy like, and I was like, oh, I'm addicted. I'm sold.
Yes.
I went back to school because I was at Kent State University at the time. I was undergrad. I went back to school and just scoured the library. I was like in the deck. I was in the stacks, like anything that had her name on it, anything that had her name in it. I was like, I'm studying her for life. You know, that was it for me. Like I was in my early 20s. I was just like, nobody was hitting it like that. You know, and I was already a sci-fi geek. You know what I mean? Like I was already like about aliens. I was already about space travel and, you know, portals and all that.
Same.
And I was just like, then you got Black women up in this bad boy.
I was like, I could be the protagonist.
I was like, what? I'm like, wow, the Black woman is in the center of this bad boy. What's going on, right? So for me, I was sold. You know, I was sold. You know, so once she passed away, though, it was so devastating. It was so heartbreaking for me that I was like, well, here we go. And I made seed. And then after that, it was no stopping me. I was just like, from here forward, I will be dedicating part of my practice to representations of her work.
I love that.
Yeah. But I do feel like the deck is the final culmination in a way. You know, like I feel like the deck is a finality to it, you know, like, okay, maybe this might be the last thing I have to say with her. You know, but, you know, who knows, girl? You know how it goes. You think you're done with something and then 2 weeks later, something comes right back around.
Well, actually, you know, I'm glad you said that because I have felt a certain similar thing of like, you know, for so long being like, everything I create, I want to be in conversation with her. Like I want, because I remember right after she died, I was at this event in Seattle and this poet got up and spoke and was like, you know, if we don't say the names of our ancestors, they go hungry in the spirit world. And the thought of Octavia, like that her name would not be spoken and that people would not understand what she had contributed to science fiction and to the future and to centering
and to the way we moved in the world.
The way we move, the way we think about change, the way we think about interdependence and community. I was just like, she's too brilliant and gone too soon. And so it's our job to make sure that everyone knows about her. And you know, even like now it's kind of, there's so many people that I'm like, oh, there's
a lot of people
tensions around. I'm like, great, let there be so many people that there's tensions around like how to hold the Octavia space. Cause I'm like, to me, that means so many people are trying to get her work in the world and her name in people's mouths. And I love that there's TV projects now, film projects. You manifested that, right? Like we need to be able to see these things. And in some way, it's like the film and television world has had to catch up, not just in terms of the technology of the kind of stuff that she was writing.
Right.
Also being able to understand the true diversity, like not the polite diversity, but like really true. I mean, she was like, you're going to have to contend with a world that is beyond these constructs you have been given for how everything works. That's how she writes. And I'm like, you know, I think when she was writing, a lot of her work was also her hopelessness about what she was seeing around her. And so I feel like all of that, like I was like, we need to be scared and we need to feel hopeless. And we also need to see the solutions and we need to consider like what we need to practice right now if we want to have a future.
That's right.
We need to pay attention to what's happening with the climate. We need to pay attention to what's happening with water.
So prescient.
It's been, you know, at the center. So like emergent strategy, holding change, like all the books, all the projects that I have been involved in, like she's been holding my hand, walking with me, all that you touch, you change. How do you practice that? What does it mean to be in integrity in a changing world? And I also feel this culmination point coming with this deck that it's like, the idea that like people are going to have this in their homes and in their hands and just be able to call on her the way I do every day. It feels really sacred to me. And it also feels like now we've done our work, Krista, you know, like we've really done our work by like bringing her forward and getting her as far as we can get her. And also like, we have so much other work to do.
We do. And she would want us to be on that work.
She wanted us because she was like, I don't want to be the only one. So I'm like, okay, well, I've got novels and novellas and trilogies and I want to write scripts and musicals. I'm like, actually, you know, she has this verse in Ursi, pray working, creating, teaching, reaching. And
Yeah.
I think about that all the time, that I'm like,
Yes.
you know, the way we honor our ancestors and the way we honor the future is to pray in all of our work. Like everything we do.
Absolutely, my friend.
So yeah.
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 Woo.
I can go on.
I mean, we could go on and on and on. You know,
But
I
I
mean,
want to see, I
yeah.
want to see if Julie has any questions for us.
Let.
If there's other people who do, because
And give me a
Krista
second,
and I
because
are in a
I'm gonna let there
lifelong
be light. While
conversation.
Julie pops on here, I'm gonna go turn his lights on. So just give me a
Oh
second.
yeah, I was like, I
I'll
didn't
be
want to
back.
mention, but I was like, it's getting a little.
I mean, you know me. I like to be a little bit shrouded
Like
in
it's a
darkness.
little vampiric and in a cool
I kind of
way.
like a little darkness in my life. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Talk amongst yourselves till I get back.
So I did have two questions. One of them was for Krista. I'm going to hold that one, and I'll ask a larger question. And it was motivated when I was listening to your podcast, Octavia Parables,
Oh, yeah.
and you were talking about the epilogue of Wild Seed.
Yeah.
And in it, one of the questions, you were talking about how Anyanwu, Anyanwu, in terms of Doro and his ability to control mind,
Yes.
she was weak against him, right? Her power was in healing. And so you posed the question that if you had the power to choose between reading and controlling people's mind or the power to heal and reshape the body, which would you choose and why? So
Yeah.
I know, instinctively, I was like, healing. But I think that motivated me to kind of think about the cards. And so for both of you, what is the power of the tarot cards that you created?
I love this question. I mean, I will say one of the things I most love about the tarot is it's all about your own knowing, your own intuition, your own guidance. So like the more you get to know your deck, like I have certain cards, I have certain cards that are like, oh, you don't want to hear that? Here it is again. Oh, you shuffled and shuffled and you still didn't want to hear it? Somehow those cards still came back up for you, right? And it's like,
rude cards.
I know I was in a situation I wasn't supposed to be in. I kept getting the Seven of Swords over and over. I was like, but why? Like, leave me alone.
I hate it.
It's a card of like, something's not right around you,
Yep.
And I was like, oh, that's true. But I also have had the experience of like coming to the deck and being like, for instance, a moment where I was like, oh, I'm having to give up a position or a job or something that I love this job and I'm feeling so much sadness. And then the card that I pull is like the Sun or the World card, where it's like, you have reached completion here. You are shining bright in this place. You've done all you need to do there. It's a celebration moment, right? And it's like, I hadn't even let my heart acknowledge how happy I am that I did this, So I think that's one of the things with tarot, like the readers that I love the most when they're working with you, they're like, what do you see first, right? Before they start telling you, well, here's it's like, first, what do you see? What do you feel when you look at this card?
Right.
And what resonates, because your intuition is the first data and the most important data when you're working with the tarot. Yes. And then you go and get the hit of like, oh, and here's a reading, here's a way of understanding this. I also really think in terms of that piece around reading minds versus healing, inside the tarot, I think both things are kind of possible. Yes. And I will say, like, I've learned that I'm like, I'm not exactly reading someone else's mind, but I can pull a card that will give me a lot of clarity on what my relationship needs to be to all these different elements. Yeah. And that clarity sometimes feels like a red mind, right? Because I'm like, oh, like if I need to, if this is telling me like, oh, this is a Knight of Wands, and I'm like, oh, like if the relationship is precarious in the way that a Knight of Wands is, that's really instructive for me, right? It tells me a little bit, there's some instability in there. And if I know that I'm pretty stable, it tells me a little bit about what's going on with the other person and
the dynamic too.
I need to move, right?
Right.
And then the healing part, I find the tarot so healing because for me, mindfulness and self-awareness is the most healing thing I can experience. It's like life is not happening to me and I'm just a victim of it. I can pull these cards and be like, how do I claim agency in this moment?
Right.
What's going on here? And what do I need to know so that I can be my best self right here, right now? What does that look like? And
Mhm.
I can't tell you the number of times I've been like, I feel so lost or so angry or so nothing, I can't figure this out. And I'll be like, Deck, I don't need to know, it's just sort of like, oh girl, no wonder everything's on fire. Right. And it's like, that's
Totally.
right. And then it just calms it down. One of the things I love about Octavia, her characters, all of her characters, the pattern that they have is they were skilled at being with what is.
Yeah.
And asking everyone else around them, can we just be real about what actually is?
Yep.
Right.
Mhm.
Like
Yep.
Anyanwu was like, I'm not ending slavery. I can't, the power that I have, the capacity I have, I can't end the whole institution.
Right.
Here's what I can do. And here's the people I can protect.
Yes.
I'm going to be with what is. Lauren Olamina. Okay, the world has lost it. I
Yep.
can find this river that
Yep.
helps us get to a different destiny. I
Yes,
can't convince
indeed.
the whole world to come with me. I just need to find the key people who will listen and
Yep.
trust that the ripples will flow out from that. Let's be with what is.
Absolutely.
It's so important.
Yes.
And so the tarot is that. It's like, can you be with what is?
Mm,
Right.
Because if you can be with what is, you have agency to change it.
absolutely.
Right?
That's so true.
Absolutely.
So true.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Adrienne.
I want to ask a question about the images, the cards themselves. So this is probably a two-part question. How does the visual on the cards, and this is for you, Krista, how does it maybe revise some other, tarot cards?
Right.
And how they presented things?
Mhm.
And the second part, what maybe stories or characters from Octavia are shaping the visuals?
That's interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's interesting question for me because I'm not sure if there were characters that I was thinking about per se when I was thinking about the visuals. I was really allowing Adrienne's writing, right? I was allowing the oracle's writing in the book to really shape what I was thinking about with the imagery. Although I leaned very heavily on the Rider-Waite Smith iconography in a lot of ways, right? So there are references, I feel like, to that critical iconography that I think people are so familiar with who are tarot readers. I did want to play on some of that too. Thinking about the emperor and the empress. I also played a little bit with gender, with some of them too, particularly with the emperor and the empress, who have different names.
Yeah, we took all the gender out.
Right. So I was really thinking about the emperor could very well be someone who is gender non-conforming or be someone who is a woman, someone who's femme. Right. There was a lot of things that I was thinking about with that. So, I wouldn't say that there are particular characters, but I definitely
Krista, can I say one thing?
Her world. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, you were reading so much off of the oracles, and the oracles, we based our readings off of specific books. So it was like, there's like a quote from Anyanwu that ends up being the tarot deck, and then you're reading that, and then you're crafting. Right. So it's flowing in that way.
Definitely in that way. But for me, there's always some kind of reference to like tentacles in my work, which is always a reference to like dawn. You know what I mean? The tentacles are always the ulai to me. It's like, that haunting imagery of them. Like whenever I think about them, it's like so creepy and also so like attractive.
I know. I was like, fine ass.
It's like seductive and as well as terrifying, So I like always think about the tentacles as like my own little personal shorthand in a way that I'm like talking about Octavia or I'm referencing her characters, right? But yeah, I would say that really the visual landscapes came a lot from the oracles and what the oracles have written in the book.
I was noticing in both the World and the Empress deck, the bees showed up.
Yeah, the bees.
Yeah, what was it about?
These came from the oracles, I feel like.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, we were talking a lot about like hives and structures,
Yes.
Octavia studied a lot of structures of like what are natural structures. And you can see that like if you look at like in Wild Seed, the way the community structures were formed initially around Anyanwu, and later around Emma, you know, like who she becomes.
Yeah.
In a way, she's like this queen bee.
The queen
they
bee.
all need and they nourish off of, and then they're all moving around in the hive and bringing energy to her in a way. So there's stuff like that like we were paying a lot of attention to, and then like looking at like, because we went back and we were like, what was Octavia studying? What was in her archives? What's in her papers? Like, what was she thinking about? And then we also thought, so like the suits, you know, it's like we did fledgling, pattern master, Uloi, and shapeshifter as our, like, instead of having a page or a daughter, son, queen, king, whatever, we're like, let's use the technology that Octavia gave us for this. We were like the Uloi, the fledgling energy, where it's like, I'm beginning, I don't quite know, it's a little wild, but that's the exciting part, you know, the pattern master, where it's like, I think I understand everything and I think I have some control over this stuff. The shapeshifter is really the one who's like, you know, I can do anything and I can go anywhere. Right? So we wanted to play with those core archetypes, which show up in the books. Like I always tell people, I'm like, I think, and this might be one other project, but it might be here too. I think all of the texts work together. I have this theory that there's this like meta way of tying all the texts in together. They really dance with each other and bounce off of each other. And I think if you have a wide view of time, you can imagine how they can all fit together. And so that was also something we wanted to bring in here. It's like there's patterns across all the work. And so some of them, and like you can see too, like I'm just going to hold up some of the pieces here.
Please do.
As we're talking, but you know, the different artists also have their own relationship to Octavia, right? So then they were bringing those relationships into the work and their reading into the work.
Yes.
And so when I look at the characters, you know, I'm like, oh, I see Doro up in this deck.
Right.
I see Yanwu up in this deck.
Yeah.
I see Mary up in this deck.
Yeah.
I see like Lauren Olamina up in this deck. I see so many of the folks that you fall in love with in the reading of the work, as well as the artists themselves.
And I think Mary does show up as in the major arcana as the high priestess, I think.
Oh yeah, I thought so too.
I have Mary as a high priestess. Yeah, I think I have her as a high priestess.
Is that in the slide? The slide that you were showing?
It was in one of the slides. It's the one that has like the brain is
okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Gorgeous work.
Yeah, and it's all very different too. So I'm really excited about that aspect. I love decks. We all there was a period in our process where we were naming all of our favorite decks and talking, you know, I learned so many decks through this process, but talking about like which decks we loved and why. And it turned out all the oracles were like, there's decks where they have multiple artists that we love. And it really brings something different to the work.
Because that was a concern, you know, to have the cohesion. You know, when you're dealing with a lot of different hands in a deck, you know, and even my work can be real kind of like, who did this? That's like, who did it? You know, so it's like we needed to have that cohesion, I think, too. There was a concern about that, but it came together really so elegantly and beautifully. Very, very honored to be a part of this project.
Yes. So while Adrienne is showing those, I want to turn it over to Anit because I know we have a lot of people with questions. Anit, handing it over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm going to start with a question from myself and then I'll turn it to the questions from the chat. So I also want to reiterate to people can write in the chat and I'll pass on the questions. I wanted to bring the question up about how Adrienne and Krista met because I think we have in the exhibition here at DBAM a second version of Library of Love. And the first Library of Love that Krista made, you can tell more about it, Krista, is that when you two got together for the first time, or was it earlier? We'll love to hear from you both how you started collaborating together.
Yeah, that was 2013. I feel like 2013, 2014. I was familiar with Adrienne, of course, because of her work, you know, just as an activist, as a thinker, as a writer, as a poet, you know, I was already familiar with her. So when I graduated from my master's degree at Columbia College Chicago, I was blessed to get a residency immediately after I graduated at Arts and Public Life at the University of Chicago. And so part of that residency engaged us as artists to do programming, you know, and I was like, you know what? Library of Love is happening. I was at that time just developing Library of Love as this homage, this love letter to Chicago. And then, you know, came out of like just this, you know, Chirac as a term was becoming very popular, you know, about kind of referencing Chicago as this site of extreme violence. And I was like, well, you know, I mean, my experience with this city is one of love. I don't know really necessarily like what y'all are talking about, but what I know is that this is a beautiful community here. And so I wanted to create this space where people could have a space of respite, a space of quietude and reflection and love, right? So I created Library of Love as a site for that. And at that time, I was like, you know, have just become familiar with Adrienne's work. And I said, let me see if I can get her to come and do a presentation on emergent strategy. And so she was gracious enough, you know, to say yes. And we brought her in, and she did an incredible workshop, you know, with the community here in Chicago at that time. And that was the beginning. That was the start of it.
Yeah. And I'll say I had been a fan before that.
Wow.
Work, you know. I had gotten, when did Seed come out?
Seed came out 2006, 2007.
So I had gotten a copy of Seed, like someone had brought me a copy of Seed because they were like, okay, you're obsessed with Octavia, you need to know this.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the hell? Like, who is this? I need to know her. So I was looking up to you from afar and just thought you were, you know, like my view, you know, now I'm stepping more into my artist self, but for such a long time I was like, artists are so cool and I could never talk to them. Like it's just like that's out of my league, you know.
Yes,
it's just there's such a, to claim yourself as an artist from get, I don't think I gave myself that permission, you know. I was like, oh yeah, I mean, I love to do that, but like I've got to have like this, you know, I've got to do something that fits into these guidelines that I, you know, in my head, I'm like, this is what I got to do. And it took so long to give myself permission to be a creator. And so I looked over and I'm like, wow, you're making such incredible work. You're moving with such bravery. You're taking such risk. You're being so, you know, like I was just blown away by who you were. So by the time you invited me, I was like, Krista Franklin was me. I'm like, like it was not,
it was a love fest from day one.
It was a love fest. And then I remember being in that space and being with the community there and the receptiveness, you know, because the community you've built around your art is love, right? So like that's to come in, that was a very different experience for me to have in Chicago, actually, you know, like and it was really warming to my heart and really helpful. Like I just have this Midwest love, and I feel like that, and then I feel like something I want people to know about us is that Krista and I are very no nonsense, you know. So it's like a lot of love, but it's also like, Krista,
rigor.
I just gonna tell you the truth about you know, I didn't do what I thought I was gonna do, and here's why, and like here's what happened, and this is going, and you know, like, and you just be like, yo, can we just cut through it and just say like da-da-da? Like there's just such a, I feel like that's one of our core dynamic energies that really work well. Like it's like really exciting to work with you because I'm like, it's so trustworthy. You're like, I'm not trying to waste no time. Like, can we tell the truth?
Let's get to it.
So I feel like, you know, it's the collaboration felt really good because of that. Like I never felt like I had to withhold the truth of how I was feeling or what I wanted to happen. And even when it came down to some of the art, you know, like there was a few pieces that was like, this isn't quite it.
And that's hard work to do that. That's hard work to do that. You know what I mean? It really hard to do with care and to do it with, you know, with honor and respect. But like, this is not. I was
like, this is gorgeous. This doesn't align with the message of this card in a way that people, you know, like, again, we need to pretend like people won't have the book
Yes.
and
Yes.
we want to really land it. And I just feel like it was so exciting to do that with you, and you'd be like, oh yeah, like let's take it back to them, and like let's figure
Let's
it
see.
out.
Let's figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's been a good learning space, just a space where I can consistently learn, whenever I'm working with Adrienne, I'm like constantly in a learning curve, and I
Same.
appreciate that.
Same.
I really do.
I
'Cause you
also
don't get that with everybody.
no, and also like learning the way to work with artists. Like it was so important, having Krista in like right at the beginning. I was learning so much about like how do we make sure these artists feel like this is something that is worth their time and their contribution, and that they feel honored.
Yeah.
And it's like so helpful. What I learned too is like in so many spaces, people are having to start at a deficit, like not even ask for what they want or not even ask for what they deserve. And especially artists are asked all the time, like, can we basically use you free?
Free.
Can we
Just tell them
basically
to
just
go away.
take whatever you have and we'll just make it viral on the internet or whatever? And I feel like it was such a beautiful thing to be like, Krista, like, what is the value of this piece?
Yeah.
What is the value of that piece? How would we ask an artist to give us 10 pieces?
Tough conversations, man.
And just like, let's really be real about it. And like,
Yeah.
and then being able to turn to the publisher and being like, this is what we need.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to shout out too to Crystal Clarity as well as Damon Davis, because both of those two were change agents in there.
Yes.
They helped me to start shaping some of my thinking about
That's right.
just the longevity of a project, like what our responsibilities are to each other for something like this. Like those two individuals specifically in this process really pushed me out of some of my comfort zones too, where I was like, oh, okay, let me rethink and take it back to the group and let's talk it out and figure out what we need to do. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. I mean, because I think it's so important. I want people to know that it's like, we really brought an abundance mindset. We really intervened on a scarcity mindset over and over and over.
And so consistently.
And it means there's a lot of, I feel like, even though I'm like, okay, I wish the deck was out already. And I feel like okay with it. Cause I'm like, abundance says there's enough time to do this.
Yeah. It took me a minute though too. I was the first one to be like, let's not put no timeline on it, but now I'm like, okay, let's go.
I was like, I'm ready. Can we do this in a year?
Let's go now.
I'm like, my Aries rising. I'm like, we had the idea and I'm ready to have it out in the world. And, you were like, oh, we don't need a timeline. And I was like, okay, well, we'll balance between those two things. And now I'm like, no, for real.
And now I'm like, let's go.
So,
that's so funny that we both have Aries rising. I don't think I realized that just now. Both of us are Aries rising. So yes. So I'm also like, let's go. After a while, I'm like, let's go. I'm gonna fight you. I'm gonna burn it all down.
It's time to be there. Okay.
I'll burn it down.
That's why we're productive. I think of that as the productive part of my chart, because the rest of my chart is kind of like, could take a little time to get stuff done. But
yeah.
All right.
Fire. All right. Question. So make sure we have time for 3 questions.
Okay.
So this is from Solomon Khan, and they ask, how can we be radical in our imagination by learning from our ancestor, Octavia Butler, to destroy ableism and racism from our interdependent and loving or collective liberation?
Wow.
I love this. Suleiman is we've been spending time together because Suleiman's over in the radical permission space, and Suleiman always asks the question with the answer in it. So I was like, that we need to dismantle ableism and racism in every single structure that we build and every single relationship that we're in.
Yes.
And I feel that Octavia did that a lot when it came to mental disabilities. So I feel like she was always dealing with people who had very different abilities, very different minds.
That's true.
Sometimes things that would overcome them or make it like, oh, I can't participate in the world in a normal way. Lauren Olamina has hyper empathy syndrome, where if she witnesses someone else getting hurt, it impacts her such that she's out, but the whole thing she always makes sure to tell us is like, this, it's not, I'm really bleeding. It's that I feel it's like, I experience it as if I've been shot or I've been hurt. In our world right now, people would be like, oh, you're crazy. And they would dismiss that, right? Octavia is like, you're the protagonist. And that quality you have is actually one of the most important parts of the story. To me, when I think of dismantling ableism, it's not let's make sure we include a ramp every place. It's like, in your mind, do you think that someone who has disabilities is less than you? Could you imagine them being the protagonist of the story
The
and
center.
moving at the pace of that person, you know?
Yes, indeed.
So yeah, I think Octavia was pushing us in that direction. I think that she could have done more in terms of physical disability and writing that into her work. And I think a lot of us have had conversations around, you know, fan fictioning the work and being like, okay, you know, I think about this, especially as my ability has changed. I'm like, well, I would not be able to walk from Pasadena all the way up to Northern California. How will I contribute? Right? How will I help meet the destiny? And I think communities have, that's part of the ways we take, you know, we talk about it a lot in the podcast, the Octavia's Parables podcast, but like, keep asking yourself that question and planning with your community in a way that includes everyone in your community in survival.
Right. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Especially because I feel like I don't know if she necessarily identified as someone who was differently able, but definitely kind of moved through the world in that way.
Well, and she definitely had some stuff, like some things going on, but I also think so much has changed. Like earlier today, I got to talk with Mia Mingus, who's one of the people who originated the term disability justice and why we can talk about it the way we do. I love Mia, but it made me realize, I'm like, oh, this way of thinking about disability justice and disability organizing is really recent. And a lot of people have been like isolated in their diagnoses or isolated in their conditions, or and so part of, you know, it's like, oh, kind of, she passed away before some of this stuff took off,
came into being. Sure. Right.
Which is also kind of exciting, right? Because I'm like, okay, it's up to us to write those stories.
Right.
Mia Mingus has a story in Octavia's Brood called Hollow, which is about people who've been people with disabilities who've been rejected from Earth, basically, onto this other planet, and they are forming basically a utopia that is constructed by all of them for all of them.
Well,
so, yeah.
Well.
All right, but you said we had 2 more questions?
Thank you. Yes. Okay, right. Maybe one more.
Okay.
Unless you're up to for 2 more, but let's see.
Let's try to wrap it.
Let's see.
That's it. Okay. Juliet is asking, they would love to hear about some of your favorite pulls. Are 1 card, 3 cards, past, present, future, and why? How do you see folks coming to these cards to pull in the ways that honor Octavia as well as their own realities and timelines?
I must say something real fast before you jump into that, because you're going to talk about the pulls in the book.
Yeah.
So that's good. Yeah. You know what? I don't do pulls like that. I'm very much of a surrealist in the ways that I play with the tarot. So it's like I shuffle and whatever flies out, and you know, my spirits are real active.
That's how Sonia Renee Taylor does it
too. I just shuffle when the cards start flying. You know, so whatever flies out is what the messages are. You know what I mean? I don't necessarily do like 1, 2, 3 because my brain doesn't work like that. My brain doesn't work in past, present, future. It's all the same thing to me. So I'm like, I don't know what you guys are saying, but I'm going to try to read these messages that you've flown out of this deck at me. You know what I mean? Almost hit me in my head with it. You know, that's my pool channels. You know, it's definitely like in the surrealist tradition of like chance operations.
Yeah.
You know, and that kind of just like letting it fly. So talk about the pools though that are in the book and as a part of
so we created a spread. We created 4 new original spreads. So we created a fledgling spread for beginning something new, that where you can ask, how are you right now? What is the energy that is called to you? How can you reconnect with your curiosity about the energy, and what energy can you bring to your next move? We did an Uloi spread, which is for relating in new ways to people. We have the Shapeshifter spread for a moment of change or crisis and for letting go. And that one has a lot. So it's like, I don't know if you can really fully see, but it's like you start up here and you read and you go through the center, the change, the portal, and then you come back out to more possibilities. And then we have a pattern master spread, which is for centering yourself inside of the wild pattern. So these, I have to say, it was really, really fun to be like, actually, what spreads would need to exist for this deck to fully work that we don't have already.
Right.
I learned to pull a card a day. Like I really learned, like, you know, my practice has always been a card a day. Yeah. And then I've gotten into the past, present, future. And I like doing certain periods of the year. Like I do an annual spread where I pull up 1 card for every month.
Yeah, I do that
Down in my
too.
journal for that year so that I can
Mhm.
look, you know, when I get there, I'm like, oh, Tower month. Bet
Yeah.
I'm ready. You know.
Yes. Yes.
So
Yep.
all right. That was as brief as I could be.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. Well, thank you so much to the
Thank
three of
you.
you. This was incredible. I want to also thank to the 100 people that joined
Thank
tonight.
y'all for
Yeah,
coming.
thank y'all.
And if
Yes.
you're in
Krista, thank you so much
Chicago,
for your brilliant art. Thank
And
you.
thank you, Julie.
thank you
Thank
so
you,
much to
Julie.
all of you. If you're in
Thank you.
Chicago, please come see Krista's work in
Yes.
person, which will be open until February. So we hope to see you.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, thank
We
you.
do. Thank you,
Good
Yoni.
night.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
ZPM. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Take care.
Love you.